Buccaneers training camp officially underway.
One of the biggest storylines coming out of Dallas Cowboys training camp.
Christian Darrisaw signs his mega deal.
Makes it seem like Florida State and Clemson will not be invited to the Big Ten someday.
You got to love that Ryan Day embraced Ohio State's extremely high standard.
Very special guest, Phil Steele.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
One of the biggest storylines coming out of Dallas Cowboys training camp.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When will CeeDee Lamb show up? I think everybody anticipated that CeeDee Lamb would have a deal done by now. We are hours away from the Cowboys taking the practice field. Still no CeeDee Lamb deal. So when do you think this is going to get done?
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't changed my answer, I think, yet from I think it gets done for the first few days of practice. But obviously, as we get closer and closer and you don't hear a ton of movement, I mean, I think there's been some whispers here and there that the two sides are talking, but I start to get a little bit nervous about that prediction. I think at this point am going to believe that I think CeeDee comes in and they get a deal done probably, before the second week of practice. Once these guys get in the same town and then that kind of really starts putting a lot of positive momentum in these contract talks. I do think that the Cowboys are, the numbers have to be kind of in place in a large degree, right? I think that the structure of everything is kind of where it needs to be. It's really about getting these two sides together and kind of haggling out the final number. And that's why I don't think that it would be too long or too contentious a holdout, because it's all kind of structured there. And I think it's really is just about getting them together and talking about it and kind of hammering out the final number to kind of get him in. But if not, it could linger on. I just don't imagine that this is going to be something that lingers past the first potentially 2 weeks of camp, only because like I said, I think that they have to be at least like 90% of the way there. It's just kind of figuring out that last little percentage point, and hopefully, no one's feelings get hurt over that process.
And the other thing is every day that CeeDee Lamb misses, he is subject to a pretty hefty fine, which is my next question. Do we see a potential hold in for CeeDee Lamb where he's going to the meetings, he's going to the practices, but he's not actually practicing? Or is he just completely going to be away from the team until he gets a new deal? This hold-in thing has become somewhat of a new thing. Jordan Love is currently doing it now with the Packers. We've seen Nick Bosa did it last year with the 49ers. What do you expect to be the case here?
I wouldn't be shocked if he used one of those strategies or even just a holdout strategy. I mean, frankly, the holdout strategy isn't even, too terribly bad and expensive. I mean, I think some of the times the teams, it used to be that the team would pay you back, some of that money in good faith after a certain amount of holdout time. But I think that's actually been
gone. Yeah, teams can't do that anymore.
So now that's gone, I think it does show kind of a seriousness when you are doing a true holdout, which is kind of probably the impetus of creating these sort of hybrid hold-ins that maybe you're not getting fined, but you're also not a full participant mentally in these situations. So I do think that with the change in the rules there, that a holdout probably would not last very long and would probably be maybe only, a couple days a week at the most. But if he decided to kind of, be a little bit tricky and try to participate in this hold-in situation, maybe he has a hammy that's tightened up on him. Oh, no, guys. And he can't practice this week. I wouldn't be shocked. I just listen. The truth of the matter is that all of this is on the table, and negotiations, they can be tough, right? They could really be, contentious all the way up until the point where you smile and shake a hand of a guy that you're going to be working with for the next 4 years and hand him a whole bunch of millions of dollars and everybody's happy, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if all these techniques get used, or if some of these techniques get used, but I honestly still put my betting odds on this getting done in the first few days of camp.
I'll be concerned if we get through the weekend and there's no deal. Like we're into week 2, because then it's like the longer this goes on, the uglier that it could get. So we'll see. All right, Landon, the Cowboys have multiple camp battles going on this year, whether it's the wide receiver 3 battle, the deep, the edge 3 battle, the linebacker spot. But I think nationally, everybody is curious about this running back battle. What do you see happening in training camp?
Well, it's an interesting arrangement, I mean, obviously it's going to be a running back by committee situation. And I think, everyone on the outside is kind of anticipating a Zeke-led situation because of the history there, but I don't necessarily anticipate that. I think, as it stands right now, you've got Zeke, you've got Dowdle, you've got Vaughn, Freeman, Malik Davis. Those are the guys who I think that are there are some other guys on the roster, but those are the guys that are kind of all in the mix in some form or fashion. The problem that we've discussed is that really, outside of Vaughn, all these guys are really very similar kind of backs. They're bigger backs. I think the thing that we like about Dowdle a little bit more than the rest of them is that he has a little bit more explosion than some of the other guys. But for the most part, these are all kind of bigger between the tackle guys. I mean, we're looking, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing a picture of Zeke, and I'm interested to see what Marcus's comment is on his weight in this picture. But I think
it looks fine. It's fine.
He looks fine. I think the issue is that, if Deuce Vaughn doesn't provide like some kind of juice for this running back room, there really isn't a ton of juice in this running back room. And if you're looking to have a committee, that's fine. I think you've got a good group to kind of get started. And I like all these guys individually as members of a committee, but they're like I said, since they're all kind of a type, and you don't really have a Tony Pollard type or an explosive guy that's going to, create big plays in the run game the way that you had previously with Pollard. It just feels very limited, right? And it feels like it's a group that is, I like Dowdle a lot as a part of a rotation of backs, but if he's the juice that's in this room, then there's not going to be a lot of explosive plays necessarily created by this group. And that's been traditionally a spot where the Cowboys have been able to kind of generate some explosive plays. So as far as the battle goes, I think, if these guys are the end of this, as far as the talent acquisition part, I think there's, kind of a pretty clear pecking order with the guys that are in this room. But the question then becomes, are they done, with the acquisition? Are they still going to go out there and get there? There's still guys out there that, that are buried on depth charts that are, I think it's going to get sorted out in training camp once we see depth charts starting to get written out in pencil. And so I think there's going to be more opportunities to add more people to this group. The interesting thing is, can you find somebody it kind of fits that role of an explosive, change of pace back, which is, probably the more difficult archetype to find, this late in the game.
I'm excited to see when the consensus comes of two things, right? It could either be one, okay, this X running back has separated themselves from the pack and he's clearly the best runner of the group, right? Or it's time for the Cowboys to make a move. Like, it just becomes so clear and obvious to everybody at training camp. Like, a lot of these dudes are just dudes, right? And they need to go out and get a guy that can actually lead the backfield. At what point do one of those scenarios play out? I got to imagine, Lane, it's going to be pretty quick. Like, I think we're going to find out within, I'll say 2.5 weeks, like who's going to be the starter or when do they need to go out and make a move. That's one of the things I'm the most curious to see, when it happens and what do they ultimately do at the running back spot.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, The Olympics, WNBA should be back soon. There's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. The Jacksonville Jaguars, despite their offseason moves, are right on the playoff bubble. FanDuel has the Jags plus 118 to make the playoffs, as well as the second best odds to win the AFC South at plus 270. The Houston Texans are division favorites plus 105. If you're a Texans fan, like our editor, Lance Daw, you may look at Houston's over-under. Their win total set at 9.5. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the moves that make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Buccaneers training camp officially underway.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast.
Training camp is officially underway. The rookies reported on Monday. Most of the veterans reported on Tuesday. And it is that time. The offseason is no more. We have actual football things to discuss. And Evan, I'm curious as to what the 3 biggest things that you're watching for during training camp. We've talked a lot this offseason about the Bucs being underrated, overlooked, underappreciated. What's Baker going to do? There's been coaching changes. There's been big contracts thrown around. There's still a big contract in limbo. But obviously there are certain things that everyone's watching for in training camp. But I'm wondering, we'll start with the biggest one. What is your biggest storyline for Buccaneers training camp?
I'm watching the outside linebacker position, man. I feel like I've beaten this to a constantly in the offseason, but even with Randy Gregory now no showing and his future with the team completely up in the air, he's been moved to the reserve, essentially an inactive list, to where he doesn't count against the team's salary cap. He doesn't count against the team's roster count. He didn't show up to mandatory OTAs. He hasn't showed up to training camp. He's a new player, doesn't know much about Todd Bowles' scheme. And I have a really tough time believing they're going to go through this whole song and dance with him, despite whatever belief they have of what he's going to be able to do for them on the field. This isn't how Jason Light and company operate. I don't think the juice will be worth the squeeze, which means Anthony Nelson is now the leader in the clubhouse for sacks on the team when you talk about the outside linebacker position at 14.5. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has 13. Yaya Diaby in his rookie season had 7.5. Then you got guys like Marquise Watts, who had 1 last year. He's a player that we're expecting, could develop a little bit from that redshirt year, we'll call it. Then Chris Braswell, who was obviously taken in the second round this year. He's still a rookie. I'm not willing to put high expectations on what he could provide. He certainly will be a depth piece, but I don't know how much of an impact player he'll be. And then we start going into guys like Jose Ramirez, So it's a problem position, one that Jason Light might have to now bring in another veteran to try to help out. It would be it's a little similar to what maybe happened to the Lightning, for any Tampa Bay Lightning fans out there, when they got Tyler Mott right before training camp. A player pretty much said, you know what, I ain't playing this season. And then they had to bring someone else in. And you know what, the guy they brought in did a pretty darn good job, got injured. But that's sort of what I'm looking at is just, that was the biggest weakness entering for this team entering the year. And, on paper, it just got a little bit worse. So, maybe they can convince Shaq to come out of retirement, come back for another season now that they kind of shed the whole salary thing. And, hopefully Miami doesn't get too angry. But, yeah, that's ultimately that's the number one thing I'm looking at. I think it's the difference between this team, the gap between winning a division and being a Super Bowl contender. I think it lies right there.
Yeah, well, and I was just about to bring up the Miami Dolphins going through kind of a similar situation. Now, at least Shaq announced his retirement and didn't just no-show, but still it was right before training camp starts, and then they ended up signing, was it Emmanuel Ogbah on Tuesday.
But at least they're familiar with him, right?
Right. Yeah. And pickings are slim out there on the edge market, as you would assume, because every team's always looking for edge rushers. So, we know that the Buck brass, Todd Bowles, Jason Light, they're high on Marquise Watts. They're high on Jose Ramirez. I know Jason Light is really high on Jose Ramirez, who, similar to Watts, kind of redshirted last year. He had dealt with some injuries coming into training camp, dealt with injuries throughout the year, and was just kind of there to learn. But yeah, this is a tough situation, and not a great look for Randy Gregory to try to endear himself to his new teammates by no showing when everybody else is there.
Yeah. I just have a really tough time believing that Gregory's going to be part of this 2024 squad. This team has such good vibes. They have such good vibes, such great team chemistry. Why add this distraction into the mix? Like, what's the worth? Not to mention, it's not like Randy Gregory is some all-world player either. I mean, he would have been a nice addition to this outside linebacker position, considering what they kind of have in the room, experience. He certainly can still get after it, but it's not like he's Micah Parsons here. You're not like losing that much. He signed for $3 million, incentives up to $5 million. Like, it's just not worth it. It's so not worth it. Just look. Yeah. You do whatever you got to do, and it could be a very serious matter for all we know. His chronic bouts with mental illness have been well stated, and I'm not here to say what he is or is not doing. Obviously he's suing the National Football League as well, due to north of $500,000 in fines due to THC levels that popped up in Denver. So, yeah, I don't know what the end game is here, but he had a pretty darn good run with the Niners. They kind of, you liked what you saw there. Seemed like he was doing well, and it's just not working out right now. So thanks. Wish you well. We'll take our money back. We'll find another option, and we'll trudge forward. And, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. I think entering this year, I said it's going to be a problem. I like the pieces they have. It's just they don't have a star. They don't have a dude who's really going to wreak havoc back there. So, Joe Tryon-Shenka, man, this is if you want to get back into good graces of your friends there in the top of this organization, certainly your coaching staff, man, you have to step up. Yaya Diaby, as a second-year player, you have to be expected to go into the double digits category. Like that's what we're really talking about, because Anthony Nelson's steady Eddie, but his ceiling, he's a high floor guy. He's not a high ceiling guy. I love Anthony Nelson, but he's not your number one. So I'm curious to see what Todd Bowles cooks up, and I imagine it's going to be a crap load of blitzes, just like he always does. And the back end might be a bit compromised, and you have to hope that this new look secondary with guys like Zion stepping up and, this slew of nickel options they have, that maybe there's a little bit of creativity going on in the all ball coach there.
Christian Darrisaw signs his mega deal.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Christian Darrisaw. He and the Vikings signed a $113 million contract, or a contract worth up to $113 million, with $77 million guaranteed and $43.7 million guaranteed at signing. There's your major numbers. So 4 years at $113 million, that's $28.25 million per year. I believe that by AAV makes him the highest paid tackle. However, when you look at the way that the cap is projected to increase, even without the specifics, just the drama of that increase, this looks to me like it's going to be a deal that ages very well. I do not have the contract details. We're still too early in that. I'll give you those when we got them, but I can at least speculate on them. And the details, if this is a contract like the ones Brzezinski always does, the first couple years are going to be a little bit deflated. You're going to be a little bit chill for the first couple of years. So he's not going to have this giant cap hit like right now. You're going to have a chunk of that signing bonus right now. If I'm looking at, 43.7 million guaranteed at signing, that probably includes his base salary this year, which Brzezinski usually does minimum base salary, and then signing bonus in the entire first year. The player will agree to that because the signing bonus is more than enough take home pay for the year. And then it helps you like distribute the cap. So if the $43.7 million is the signing bonus, then that would spread out through 5 years of the contract. Importantly, this adds 4 years onto what was already there. Right now, Christian Darrisaw is on the 4th year of his rookie deal. He'll play out his 5th year option year, and then the next 4 years of the contract start after that. So we have Christian Darrisaw in purple through 2029. That is a long-term commitment. He is the only Viking under contract for 2029. That's that. We didn't have one of those yet. Now we do. And that, I think, helps put to rest a question about Kwesi and, committing to players that I think was reasonable to ask after he sort of let go all of those veterans from the Zimmer era, many of which were old, but not all of them were old. And Danielle Hunter let go, commit to somebody, right? I was very adamant about calling for him to commit to somebody. And a lot of that too was asking for a Justin Jefferson extension and asking for this, which I thought would happen next year. So I'm very happy about this. I didn't think this was going to be possible. I didn't think Christian Darrisaw was going to say yes to this, because here is the deal. You make $28.25 million right now, but the real cap hit of that is not going to set in until like 2027. And by 2027, $28 million a year ain't going to feel like anything. So signing the deal this early is, I think, going to cost Christian Darrisaw a lot of money in the long run versus if he had waited until next year, which is the exact bet Justin Jefferson made, and it worked out for him to the tune of like 5 or 6 extra million per year. Like that's a big chunk of money that he made just by waiting for the cap to go up one more year before he signed the deal. That's why I went through this whole offseason thinking, like, there's no way Christian Darrisaw says yes to this. There's no way that there's no reason for him to get this done this early, which is why you don't see guys sign early this often. Right now, the people signing their extensions are people from the draft class before that one. This is we're having a CeeDee Lamb discussion, T. Higgins discussion, right? T. Higgins doesn't have the 5th year option, obviously, so it's a little bit different. But Justin Jefferson, these are the guys signing their contract right now. So Darrisaw does it early. And I think that's going to make the contract become very, very team friendly. Now, we don't have the structure right now, but I can at least tell you what to look out for. Obviously, the structure of the guaranteed payout is really, really important. And what you're looking for when you go on to the over the cap breakdown is, what year does this become flexible? What year does this become cuttable? What year does this look like a really hot restructure candidate? Once it's a tradable or cuttable contract, the money amount starts to feel really, really fake, because you can always just go and say, hey, take a pay cut or we cut you, right? You can do that, which happens a lot at the end of these contracts. And by, the last year, the second to last year of the contract, you've probably done a couple of restructures and you've probably changed the cap hit so that is no longer the case. But you always have the option of not doing that, right? You're not locked into doing that. It's just kind of what tends to happen, because it tends to be a pretty good idea down the road. There's also, look out for void years and stuff, although there would be no reason to put a void year on the deal right now. You can always tack that on later. If there is, look 5 years ahead of that void year, and there's probably a restructure happening. That is the way Justin Jefferson's contract is constructed. He has this big roster bonus, or this big like option bonus thing that's clearly going to turn into signing bonus and be restructured. And then there's a void year that's like to help that restructure a little bit thinner. But you just can't do that ahead of time. You have to put a trigger in the contract for it to happen later. So there's like this void year that's got nothing in it right now. So maybe look out for that kind of thing if Brzezinski wants to use that trick again. But really, you're looking for the commitment, right? And with Darrisaw, there's not really any serious reason to not make that commitment, really hard. But with all of these contracts, I like the Jared Goff contract that he just signed. I think of that one. That's a 2-year commitment. And by year 3, there's an out. You can get out of that if it's not working out. So that doesn't show the same the same faith in him as it does, as the Justin Jefferson contract, which is like deeply guaranteed, way into it, and like he's going to see all that money. That's going to be the difference. So try to take your eye off the amounts a little bit and look at the commitment. But regardless, you got to be really stoked about this, right? Like, this is really awesome, great, fun news. The thing that I can't get past is, like, I think Darrisaw takes a bit of an L on it, even though it is the highest paid contract, for now. Rashawn Slater will probably sign a bigger one. Like, it's fine. So it is a market rate. It is a high contract, but I think doing it now just doesn't serve him very well. But he decided to do it. Maybe he just really wanted the drama to be done. He just wanted to get his signing bonus money. He didn't want to wait anymore. And hey, sure, whatever you want, right? I can always respect that. But it's going to be team friendly. It's going to age into a way that makes it team friendly. So how about Christian Darrisaw locked up through 2029 on a team friendly deal? That's where we're at. Let's party. This rocks.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets of football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On with $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Makes it seem like Florida State and Clemson will not be invited to the Big Ten someday.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Commissioner Tony Petitti kicked off the Big Ten Media Days from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis on Tuesday, and he kicks off his second year as commissioner of the conference. He mentioned AAU academic accreditation 3 times, and how that makes schools like Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA great, perfect fits for the Big Ten. I thought that does not bode well for schools like Florida State and Clemson, who might want to join the Big Ten after getting themselves dislodged from the ACC. More on that in a moment, though. It was a big day. We covered a lot of territory today, so let's get into it. Petitti began by singing the praises of the conference coming off a very successful 2023 athletic year. He reminded us that the Big Ten Football Championship, by the way, will be moving to CBS. And he said that the championship game will remain at Lucas Oil in Indianapolis for the next 4 years till 2028. But while answering a question later on, he did admit that the conference would be opening to showcasing its championship game in other locations, like Las Vegas, for example. So keep that in mind down the road. Of course, he did welcome the 4 new teams, USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, and they will officially join the Big Ten in a week and a half on August 2nd. That is when they are members. Now, during his look back to the 2023 year and kind of throwing all the accolades out there, he noted the importance of women's athletics this past year. Why not? It was definitely a big year. He mentioned the Nebraska volleyball team, and they drew 92,000 fans at Memorial Stadium last August. He mentioned the Iowa women's basketball team that drew 55,000 people to watch them play at Kinnick Stadium, of course, home to the football team. And speaking of Iowa basketball, and why wouldn't you, given that all that's going on in the year of women's sports, that was kind of ground zero with Caitlin Clark in the middle of all that. Petitti mentioned how 7 separate TV networks set all-time ratings marks
for showing Caitlin Clark in Iowa all time. I did not know that. I thought that was a very interesting stat. 7 different networks had their best numbers ever for women's sports when they were airing Iowa basketball. Let's not forget how Iowa and the women's national championship game outdrew the men's national championship game of basketball this year. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, and it happened. Petiti did not forget to mention the men. Purdue center Zach Edey becoming the National Player of the Year. Of course, giving the Big Ten the sweep for Players of the Year for men's and women's. He also mentioned this year how the conference had 20 individual national championships and 5 team national championships, including Michigan's undefeated run through college football. And again, stay tuned. Got a little something for you on Spygate in just a few minutes. But three times, he mentioned academics in relation to expansion, whether he talked about it or whether he had it in one of his answers to some questions that were fired his way. He said he's proud to welcome the 4 new West Coast teams and how AAU members who arrive with academic chops, they can add to the academic reputation of the Big Ten. And again, ACC teams who are looking to leave, teams like Florida State and Clemson, they don't hold that academic recognition. That doesn't mean they're bad schools or not good academic schools. I know I'm going to hear about it in the comments. People get very defensive about that. They're just not AAU accredited, which the Big Ten likes. All of their schools are accredited with the exception of Nebraska. By the way, if you want to look at the ACC teams in Florida State and Clemson, how they're not AAU accredited, Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, and North Carolina are. And so is Notre Dame, by the way. So with all that talk with expansion, there are many that believe that the conference will not add a school that is not accredited by AAU. So that's where we're at with that right now. It looks like it's pretty important. So Petiti also welcomed the 7 new football coaches to the Big Ten. That includes the 4 new West Coast coaches and Dan Lenning and Lincoln Riley and Jed Fish and, of course, Deshaun Foster, but also Sharon Moore at Michigan, Kurt Signetti at IU, Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. He also bragged about how huge Big Ten football ratings are across numerous networks and also pointed out that 44 of the 50 most watched games in 2023 were on over-the-air networks, not cable. And he noted that 2024 will see 60 Big Ten games on over-the-air networks like NBC and CBS. So it still sticks. He's excited about how the Big Ten is so deep with the additions and how we're basically guaranteed premier matchups every single week of the season. We here at Locked On Big Ten are also very excited about that fact. And with the expanded 12-team playoff and the new format, the Big Ten will have a greater chance of getting multiple teams into the college football playoff. So that was all part of his opening monologue, if you will, his greeting to everybody and the media that was all gathered at Indianapolis. And at that point, he opened it up for questions. Some of the questions that he got, for example, the first one, hey, with expansion and a coast-to-coast footprint, he was asked about the travel challenges for these student athletes who still have to go to class, right? He said, look, each sport is different, and they are trying to minimize travel as best they can. It's a tough job. He says they're going to monitor it. They're going to get constant student feedback and kind of work in progress, if you will. There was a Buckeyes reporter that immediately asked Petiti about the suspension of Jim Harbaugh last year for Spygate, and 9 months later, is there anything new from the NCAA on this matter? Tony Petiti said he did not know the NCAA timetable. We did a podcast on this about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, how there's been nothing, absolutely nothing coming out of it. So he stands by the results of his the decision that was made during all that and suspending Jim Harbaugh for 3 games. He was asked, what is the current position on expansion given all the turmoil in the ACC? Favorite topic here on this podcast. And he said, as I predicted he would yesterday, and as I predicted last week, he'll say, we're good with our 18 teams that we have. We put a lot of work into fitting in the 4 new teams and working our schedules. We're very proud of our schedules. We love the great matchups. And again, he also threw in how he loves how the 4 new schools are great academic fits for the Big Ten. That's the third time he mentioned it. He was asked about Friday night football. Big Ten getting more and more into Friday night football in their recent TV package. Obviously, traditionally, Friday nights have been saved for high schools and not competing against them. And of course, a lot of football families are out and about watching their kids and might not be watching games on TV, on national TV. He still said the Friday national exposure is good, and they want to do it without also burdening campuses on Friday night as opposed to Saturday afternoons. And he also mentioned, some schools are more into it than others. For example, we've discussed this here. Michigan State absolutely likes playing on Friday night, and they will continue to do so when the opportunity presents itself. Ohio State and Michigan absolutely hate it. They don't want to do it. In fact, Michigan never has played on Friday night. For the first time since 2019, the Big Ten opens week 1 without any head-to-head Big Ten matchups. They've been doing that lately. And Tony Petit says that's just kind of the way the schedule worked out with 9 conference games and whatnot. But what he really drove home, and this is something we'll talk about more, and I think it's the right way to look at it. He wanted the schedule to be put together where conference football games in November are huge. He wants as many teams still viable for a playoff run playing each other in November. Big games in November. Sure, makes sense. Why not? He was asked about the House settlement, which ultimately led to power division schools, conference schools, having to do revenue share, $22 million a year. That's what came about with all that. He said, we're still working on a conference-wide plan, how to divide all that up. He is working with his other colleagues from the other conferences, and this will allow, of course, players to benefit directly from the university, direct payments and all that stuff. He said they're still trying to build a model on this, but they're building a model that currently does not exist. So still some work to be done with all of this. And then finally, back to expansion, if you will. If you want to, he was basically asked, hey, what's the criteria of these teams that are coming in? What do you like? What are you looking for? It's kind of going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. You have to have certain academic street cred in order to get into the Big Ten. He said, look, it's a holistic approach. He says it starts with academics, right? You got to be strong in multiple sports. And then the question is, how are you in football? And because football drives it all. Football drives all the money. And will your football program support the conference in its objective to make money? So, Florida State, Clemson, going back to them, their football stands by itself. It's good. Moneymaker. Academics, maybe not what the Big Ten's looking for. Are you good in multiple sports? Yes, no. These are the things they look at.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the Olympics, WNBA should be back soon. There's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. The Jacksonville Jaguars, despite their offseason moves, are right on the playoff bubble. FanDuel has the Jags plus 118 to make the playoffs, as well as the second best odds to win the AFC South at plus 270. The Houston Texans are division favorites, plus 105. If you're a Texans fan, like our editor, Lance Daw, you may look at Houston's over-under. Their win total set at 9.5. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the moves that make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
You got to love that Ryan Day embraced Ohio State's extremely high standard.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Ryan Day, during his 15-minute live press conference on the Big Ten Network, didn't shy away from embracing Ohio State's extremely high standard. And as Ohio State's coach in a very important season, that's exactly what you want. You want the coach at Ohio State to not shy away from answering questions about various topics or position battles and things, but also you want a coach that truly understands what it means to be the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, because it's unlike coaching any other program in the country. Now, you may say, Jay, USC is one of those schools that has an extremely high standard. Look what USC has been over the past 20 years. Do you think that would fly in Columbus? Absolutely not. Think about what Alabama. Now, that's a little bit different because Saban's the GOAT. I don't say the GOAT loosely. He is the greatest college football coach of all time. But Alabama's had down years. I mean, down years. I mean, you can look at history and think about that. Ohio State doesn't really have down years at all. They don't have that. Auburn and even Georgia's hot now. This wasn't always the way Georgia has been. Ohio State standard and coaching at Ohio State is literally unlike any other school in the country. And if that's the case, you want a man that's calling the shots, that is leading the troops, that fully understands, not just understands the standard, but embraces said standard. And I'm glad Ryan Day did on that stage. He was the last coach to speak on Big Ten Media Days on the first day of the 3-day event. First time in the history of the Big Ten. It's a 3-day event, but when you have 18 schools, it's a whole lot better to have 6 schools go over a 3-day period over trying to cram 9 schools a day during a 2-day span. Trust me, y'all don't want that. I have been there when it's 7 schools a day. It is a long day. It can be mentally exhausting to be basically at a press conference for that long. But Ryan Day kind of made a statement about this. Said, hey, you expect to win every game. That's just what it is. If you don't think that's the case, try losing a game at Ohio State. You're expected to win them all. That's not new. We embrace it in recruiting. We want to make sure that those types of people are in our program. And Ryan Day's realizing it's not just what's going on in Columbus currently. It's also about those guys that'll be in Columbus in the future. And we want to make sure everybody embraces what we got, the standard here. Think about you as a fan of Ohio State and how you react when Ohio State loses. Many of us can pinpoint in our brain individual losses that sting more than normal. For me, it's the Michigan State loss in 2015. That was 9 years ago. But that loss that day, I remember where I was, I remember where I watched the game. I actually believe that was a mid-afternoon kickoff. I don't ask how I remember that either. I just think I remember that part there. I remember my reaction when that kicker, not going to call him any names, he made that kick and it did the windmill celebration. I remember what happened. I remember the feeling I felt. I remember thinking, man, the season, it's not over officially, but they're not going to the playoff to compete for a national championship. You could just throw that out the window. That's exactly what happened. Didn't have a chance to win the Natty that year, to go back-to-back. It stung. Some of y'all might not like this. Some of y'all get a little uneasy about the Purdue loss in 2018. The Iowa loss, I think that was 2017. Some people get a little upset about the Michigan State loss in the 2013 Big Ten Conference Championship, or the multiple losses to Clemson in bowl games. I believe one of the scores was 31-0, and I believe to the 2013 season. After losing to Sparty, you lose to Clemson. I want to say that was the Orange Bowl as well. Ugh, that's ugly. 2019. Now, if you think that loss, that stinks for me too. Many of you realize, hey, this is standard. We collectively expect Ohio State to win every game. Now, if you're a betting person, it might be a little bit different. But if you're talking about just your fandom and not putting your betting mind into the conversation, you'll probably think, hey, Ohio State has the talent to win every game on their schedule, week in, week out. And there are times you're going to pick against them to win the game. Trust me, we do it here. Don't like it. That's exactly. I got heat for my prediction. I'll say strong heat, but a little light heat for my prediction for the Cotton Bowl when I picked Missouri to beat Ohio State. And it wasn't because I thought Ohio State, if they played their best, didn't have a chance to win the game. I just thought, well, based on the circumstances where guys weren't playing and there's injuries and Combo Core transferred, it didn't look like the cards were in Ohio State's favor, and they were not. But that's still not acceptable based off the standard at Ohio State. Ryan Day embraces that. There's been a lot of conversations about Ryan Day and wondering, does he truly understand what it means to be the head coach at Ohio State? Does he truly understand what it means to play in and even coach in this rivalry with Michigan, the game? Not me personally, but a lot of people have been questioning Ryan Day, and does he truly get it? I think he gets it. He doesn't have to be very dogmatic. He doesn't have to be very loud and animated when talking about certain things. No, he does not. What does he have to do? Do his job. He has to do his job. He has to learn, has to tap into things. He has to talk to former players. He has one on the staff, actually multiple on the staff, actually. He has to do all those things. And I believe Ryan Day is embracing it, and I think he's portraying it on the recruiting trail like he mentioned, which is why the Buckeyes are able to get the players that they get. There's a lot of guys out there on the recruiting trail that emphasize the NIL. What can you give me financially? A lot of guys are just coming to Ohio State because, one, they want to come to Ohio State. 2, they want to be developed here. 3, they want to be developed here to go off to the NFL to get a big bag. That's what they want. But also along the way, you also want to win conference, beat your rival. What else you want to do? A lot of big things in college football that don't include losing. Yeah, Ryan Day gets it. That's what you want. You want a coach that gets it, at least understands and embraces the standard. Now, embracing the standard is one thing. How does that translate to what happens on the field? That is another. Trust me, there's a lot of things Ryan Day talked about here during the presser live on the TV. As your boy was not able to attend Victon Media Days this year, decided to stay home. Very wise. I think that was the only decision I was going to make. Son was born a few weeks ago. I'm not going to leave him with my wife all day and just say, no, I got to go. No, family is coming first.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets of football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On with $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Very special guest, Phil Steele.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kansas has much bigger expectations than any other year that I've talked to you, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's a lot more fun talking about Kansas football right now as we've done this show for some time, Derek. It's always I always used to pick Kansas last in the Big 12 and then move on. And I was talking to Coach Leipold about that, I think 2 years ago, and said, Coach, you're making my job a lot more difficult. I always used to just pick you last and moved on. And he did not offer any apologies for that. And I love the squad he's built this year. It's a very veteran unit.
Well, and when you look at the predictions right now, you have them forecasted for picked tied 7th, which, you know, some KU fans might think, oh, that's a little bit low. But read the whole thing, because if you go to the end, because based on how I'm kind of interpreting this, the biggest storyline of the season to me is how healthy will Jalen Daniels be. You don't have Jalen on any of your 4 all Big 12 preseason teams. So I'd imagine the reason why is because you're just curious how it's all going to work out with the injury stuff. But you mentioned at the end of one of the pages that if Jalen was healthy, this team can contend for a Big 12 title, and that 2 of your power ratings are actually calling for double-digit wins. So in your estimation, like, just how much of a difference in terms of a win total are we talking? Like, what is a range of wins versus a healthy Jalen Daniels versus a non-healthy Jalen Daniels? How does that affect things this season?
Yeah, I think it's really big. And, you know, with Jalen, it's not like he's coming off a knee injury where you say, okay, it's 9 months and then he'll be 100% or something like that. It's a back injury. And as we knew last year, it depends what day it is as to what the back injury did. So I'm curious as to how this turns out this year. But I would say with a healthy Jalen Daniels, probably the ceiling would be 10 wins, maybe even 11, with a little luck. Without Jalen Daniels, I'm a little concerned that there's no Jason Bean as the backup quarterback. Cole Ballard did look good in the game against K-State last year. They've got some talent back there, but to me, there's a large drop-off. So I would say you probably go down to maybe the 7-win category, but that in itself is amazing, Derek, that we're talking about the basement for Kansas being about 7 wins, isn't it?
Yeah, no, pretty incredible from where we were. That was like a dream season 5 years ago, So when you look at the positions of strength for KU, running backs are your highest graded for the position in the Big 12. Versus some of the ones that you have the bigger questions about. Like I looked to linebackers, which is rated 15th. The defensive line is rated 13th there. There was an interesting nugget, though, in the linebacker part on the Kansas page where Lance Leipold talked about this being the most complete linebacker group in terms of athleticism that they had here. And I think the linebacker group is going to surprise a little bit. I think there is more talent there this year than last year. And you look at some of maybe the Pro Football Focus grades, and the guys who were maybe more the backups who are going to be starters this year actually had better grades than the starters. So, like, if I were to tell you that the linebackers ended up being, I don't know, more like nationally or Big 12 average, like around that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th best unit in the Big 12 as opposed to 15th, how much do you think that would help the defense in getting better?
Yeah, I think it would be huge. And I think it, like you said, it is a distinct possibility. You got to go with what Coach Leipold feels about the linebacker unit. You look at J.B. Brown, he's one of the most physical players they have at linebacker. He's earned the opportunity to be the starter right now. Wheeler is another guy that, as you mentioned, had a good season as a backup last year. He's more of a downhill linebacker, which I like, especially coming up in the middle at 230 pounds. And they've got some depth with like a Berryhill back there, a guy with starting experience. He started 13 games in 2022, and he could also vary as a pass rusher. So good talent there. And, the one thing about Lance Leipold, this guy builds defenses, and you go back to 2021, his first defense, they gave up 42 points per game. Then in 2022, 35 points per game. Last year, 26 points per game. And we saw what he did at Buffalo as well. That's got to have you excited if you're a Jayhawk fan.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if they can creep that up a little bit more, that would certainly be helpful. Overall, what is your biggest, question or concern that Kansas is going to have to answer if they are going to want to, compete for a Big 12 title?
Well, I think this is a team clearly capable of competing for a Big 12 title, because when I remember what I do with the coaches when I talk to them and my conversations, I send them over my team pages, I have every player on them. I tell them, put me in the right order, tell me a little something about the key players, and then give me a position wrap up. And as we went along, this is a veteran team. This is really a deep veteran team. In fact, they've got 30 plus seniors on this squad this year. And almost every unit, I was like, wow, they got a lot of depth, a lot of experience here. And so I was pretty pumped up. My big question marks, to be honest with you, Derek, are the health of Jalen Daniels, and then the fact that there's no true home games. How's the Arrowhead thing going to factor in? You look at the Iowa State game, for example, on November the 9th. Iowa State's going to have a good amount of fans there. What's the mix going to be for that particular matchup? What's it going to be like playing in a soccer stadium? The familiarity of playing in your home stadium versus playing all 6 of your home games not in your home stadium. That was the other major factor I had. But the way that Lance Leipold has built this team, I do consider him a clear Big 12 contender this year.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting. The Colorado game, too. How much will they travel, especially if they're doing well at the end of the season? Was there a player or two that you kind of got the sense that the coaching staff that Lance Leipold was maybe high on to break out this year or fill into a bigger role?
Yeah, I'm going to go let's start with Quentin Skinner. He was the number 3 receiver last year, but he's got a chance. I mean, he is 6'5", 195, and I think he's special. He makes 50-50 catches, more like 80-20 catches, makes the highlight plays, the big catches. I think you're going to see him, after being the number 3 receiver last year, really emerge this year.
And that becomes interesting. Kansas, when you look at it, like none of the receivers are putting up, mega stats. You look at somewhere like Pro Football Focus, they've been top 10 in receiving grade in the country the last 2 seasons. So I guess that would certainly help if Jalen does get hurt, having those guys to kind of fill in and help out in some way. Is there anybody on the defensive side of the ball that the staff seem pretty high on and what they can bring to the table this year?
Yeah, definitely the cornerback combination. I mean, Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson, they're the best starting cornerback duo in the Big 12. So when you've got corners like that, that really frees up your defense. You could play man-to-man coverage. You've got shutdown corners. You're in great shape because now you can send that extra man on a blitz and create more pressure. So I think having a cornerback combination like that is outstanding. Go back to bring a little Cleveland flavor in. That's where I'm from. In the dog pound era, they had Minifield and Dixon at cornerback, and that made the Browns one of the best defenses in the NFL at that time.
When you're evaluating teams, I don't know, is there a weight given to, I'm always curious, like, are there certain positions where it is more beneficial to have experience? Obviously, Kansas has a lot of experience in that back end, but I'm curious if typically when you're previewing teams and thinking about how good a team is going to be, like, are there certain positions where you care more or care less about how experienced they are in terms of how you think that's going to impact their team?
That's a tremendous question, Derek. And I would say the answer is clearly yes. I think the 2 positions where you really want the experience, number 1 is quarterback. You'd love to have a quarterback that's been through the rigors, had the road starts, had the big wins, proven that he can play in the final seconds of the game. I think that's really huge. And then the other major position, which I think really needs that continuity, is the offensive line. When you have an offensive line that's worked together, they play like 5 guys or really 1 unit. That's another area. Now, I think running back, you could plug a guy in that doesn't have experience. If the offensive line opens up the holes, if the play call's correct and he's got the talent, I think he can achieve. Same thing a receiver, but offensive line and quarterback would be the 2 positions, I would say.